a lot has come out. So we're going to go in chronological order, which was updating itself up and during Dynamite tonight. But folks, I'm on top of it. So on Tuesday, we got a filing from Vince McMahon's legal team that issued a statement, and this was Vince McMahon's first significant address of the allegations made by Janel Grant in her lawsuit filed in January against Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE. Now, it's a 29-page filing that you can go see all of the key points up on the site, but from the statement, it included quote, by publicly filing her salacious, false, and defamatory complaint, the plaintiff, this being Janel Grant, has brazenly and intentionally violated a binding contract to arbitrate. The complaint's outrageous claims of sexual abuse and coercion are pure fiction, plainly intended to garner publicity, and are flatly contradicted by the plaintiff's own contemporaneous statements. Contrary to the plaintiff's false allegations, the plaintiff and defendant engaged in a consensual relationship during which the defendant never coerced the plaintiff into doing anything and never mistreated her in any way. For the avoidance of doubt, however, the defendant vehemently and categorically denies all allegations of wrongdoing in the complaint, including the plaintiff's outrageous claims that the defendant coerced plaintiff into unwanted sexual acts, sexually assaulted and or battered her, trafficked her, and defecated on her. Those are false statements intended for publicity. When the complaint's allegations are adjudicated in the proper forum, which they specify to be arbitration, witnesses are called to testify under oath, and all communications between the parties are produced. The allegations and claims will be disproven, and the plaintiff will be exposed for the liar that she is. So Vince McMahon is denying all the allegations against him, which included Janel Grant citing physical and emotional damage, sexual assault, and being trafficked while working at WWE beginning in 2019. In the statement from McMahon's side, the keys to focus on, they are going by the language that was in the NDA, that should there be any dispute that arises, that it would be contested in arbitration, which means it would be behind closed doors and we would not necessarily know any of what happens in this private setting. So that is what McMahon's side is aiming to do, and believes that, from their side, they stopped paying when they believed that the NDA had been broken by Janel Grant, and that they have to still honor the language in there. So that's the one key. And then they are trying to dispute certain elements of Janel Grant's story. McMahon's side is stating that she was not in this deep grieving period after her parents died, and that she was not giving them around-the-clock care. Also stating that Janel and Vince McMahon were both in separate relationships when they were engaging in this affair together, and that just trying to attack Janel Grant in certain aspects. Now, Ann Callis did send us a statement in regards to several of these accusations, and Ann Callis said, quote, Vince McMahon has never known a storyline that he doesn't twist to fit his own shameful narrative. Her father was in-home hospice during his final days, where Janel continued to care for him around the clock. Prior to his death, she had been caring for her blind, wheelchair-bound mother. Using the grief of someone who lost both of her parents is an all-new level of disgusting. And in regards to this fiancé that Vince McMahon stated that Janel was still involved with when they got together, Callis said that, quote, she was not dating at the time. Her ex-boyfriend allowed her to stay in the apartment as she rebuilt her life and resume taking care of her parents. She had no job and no other financial support to lean back on. So that is where that stated. And to get further clarity on the whole arbitration issue, we did have lawyer Jason Cruz on from the MMA Payout site on today's show with myself and Brandon Thurston to kind of take us and navigate through this process that they're going to go through. Essentially, it comes down to, just a arbitrator actually deciding if this should go to court or go to a formal arbitration process. But that is still to be determined about the avenue of which this goes. But obviously, McMahon's side, for their reasoning, want to do this in private rather than in public. So today, there was a response to this that was filed by Janel Grant's team with a motion to strike this statement. And from that filing, the plaintiff, Janel Grant respectfully requests that the court exercise its inherent power to strike the inflammatory lies made in defendant Vincent K. McMahon's memorandum of law in support of his motion to compel arbitration. Instead of using his motion in the appropriate manner to raise legal arguments concerning whether this dispute must be submitted to arbitration, McMahon instead uses the motion's preliminary statement as a platform to launch vicious falsehoods and attacking Janel's moral character in a transparent attempt to harass and intimidate her into submission. McMahon's easily refuted lies have no place in this case. It was not necessary, reasonable, or responsible to use a public filing to impugn Janel's moral character. Indeed, McMahon's desperate attempt to distract from the legal substance of the motion highlight its weakness and the weakness of his overall case. The court has inherent power to strike a party's filings. Accordingly, Janel respectfully requests that the court exercise that power to strike the motion's preliminary statement in its entirety and admonish McMahon and his counsel that such statements have no place in civil litigation. So that came out tonight, and then within about an hour, I would say, we got a statement from Jessica Rosenberg, who is one of Vince McMahon's lawyers, who just stated that the plaintiff had no right to bring this case in a public court, but did so anyway. Now that she chose this public forum to falsely accuse Mr. McMahon, she wants to silence his ability to respond. She can't have it both ways. And that is where we are up to date on this back and forth between the two sides. My takeaway from today, and this certainly has amplified, especially today, is that I think Vince McMahon's side, once they have gotten their story out, I mean, I just found this was the most aggressive we have seen the McMahon side, and it makes me wonder if this is going to be more of the playbook now of playing this out in public, trying to smear Janel Grant, and playing a lot of this out in public, because they have been exceptionally quiet, as you know, Wei, throughout this whole period, beyond Vince just denying these claims when they were made back when the suit was filed. And now they had this very extensive statement that they put out on Tuesday, and then, were very quick to get out a response tonight. And I'm just curious if this is going to continue to play out publicly. Like I foresaw this getting very ugly, and I think we're getting to that stage now where it's just going back and forth and making claims.
Right. From what has taken place so far in the past few days, it all kind of reads to me like it's expected legal behavior between two parties that want to discredit the other, and also, I guess, more so from Vince's side, wanting, I'm assuming, ultimately some form of settlement, if not, just maybe an obstruction of access to information for the public, period.
And ultimately, if Vince's side prevails, like they've outlined, like they want the $1 million that Vince initially paid her of the $3 million in the NDA.
So what I'm very curious about, I mean, so much of this now seems to come down to who broke the NDA first. Vince's side continues to allege that it was Janel Grant who initially leaked that information out there to the board members. What proof do they have of that? Can they prove that in court? Because right. I guess, Janel Grant does have proof that Vince McMahon didn't pay his side. So is that enough? I'm also very curious because, in this McMahon lawsuit, they here. One part that where they say when the complaint's allegations are adjudicated in the proper forum, which in brackets arbitration, witnesses are called to testify under oath in all communications between the parties, including those authored by plaintiff Janel Grant, which she intentionally did not share in her complaint or produce. The allegations and claims will be disproven, and plaintiff will be exposed for the liar she is. So I'm very curious to know what sort of information they might be holding that they feel is enough evidence to put Vince McMahon in the right, that we're not privy to.
Well, we saw a sample of it with the New York Post story with the love letter that was disclosed, and I'm certain that they're building their side of things. Just one detail to go back, and Way's right about the assumption that Janel Grant this is an argument of who broke the NDA. For Vince McMahon's side, it was the board of directors that was contacted by a friend of Janel Grant's in March of 2022, which, I mean, obviously, if this friend was privy to this information, it would obviously have to come from Janel Grant or someone close to her that she had disclosed it to. And from Janel Grant's side is that not only did the payments stop, but also when she is citing like the Speak Out Act, and there's also a sex trafficking act that would make this settlement this non-disclosure agreement null and void to begin with, given what is accused as well. So again, that is like, we are still in this argument of who is even going to be, what is the venue to even settle that. That's going to be the next key, along with the responses that we are still awaiting from John Laurinaitis and from the WWE, mainly the John Laurinaitis response, because he is a key in all of this in terms of what his statement and defense is going to be, and what side it is going to give credence to, because here is somebody that can very much, sway in terms of like what the public opinion is, and more importantly, what the legal ramifications are going to be if he can corroborate what is being accused.
Were there elements of the Grant lawsuit that you were surprised, or you were waiting for McMahon's side to address that they didn't?
Well, I would state that when you came away from the case, the lawsuit, it reads horribly, and you had Vince McMahon in this statement like denying what is being alleged. But for a lot of people just reading that suit, like you heard it from CM Punk, like it was, the text messages alone were just so damning, and that was enough that would be grounds to fire somebody from the company at the very least. And like, I don't even know what your defense was going to be for those texts, other than the fact that they weren't even addressed here. Like, there's not even the attempt at stating that these texts were somehow fabricated or anything like that. And I think that will, I think that does resonate with a lot of people, just seeing that physical evidence in the lawsuit of these texts that were not mentioned at all in these 29 pages.
Yeah. The only thing I could see maybe slightly addressing that was the paragraph that I had just read, where they feel like it seemed to give some indication that maybe the full picture with Janel Grant's own responses to those texts might provide a fuller idea of what the context is behind them. But I don't know what sort of context you can have to excuse some of that. Maybe also not to mention the jump in pay that Janel Grant just suddenly received from $100,000 to $200,000.
That's a huge point, Wei, because in the statement there is the specific language about her law degree, and it was something to the effect of that she supposedly had a law degree from Pace University. And I'm reading that, and maybe I'm inferring the tone that this is meant in, but if you're taking it as she supposedly had, as though he's questioning her legal background, well, that opens up the larger question that you asked about, really not addressed at all about this, is why was she hired for this legal position if you're questioning her legal background, much less the promotion she received in the WWE, and at its base, can this be a consensual relationship when this woman is working in your company? And that may come down to Vince McMahon's belief of what a consensual relationship is or is not. But in modern workplaces, like, that is not a consensual relationship in that sense, when there is that great of a power discrepancy as well. And that would be an aspect too in the statement that is not addressed, but that would be something that I'm certain that the plaintiffs would focus on.
So at least for now, it seems like they're being very public with at least answering each other's claims through sources like ours. Do you think that continues?
I think so. I think that I think both sides are. Well, I don't know. I'm looking at today, and just today, this was a very public and aggressive day, especially from the defendant's side. Yeah, I'll just say that it was certainly, granted, this is just one day after this filing is made by McMahon's side, and I don't know if this is going to continue or if they put this out and now they lay low. But I mean, today you got like quite a lot coming out here, and we will see if this continues. But we saw the New York Post story, and is there going to be other types of leaks of different evidence and utilizing a public forum to try this case, even though the whole position of this statement is this should be mitigated in private with arbitration. The last question I'll throw out to you, Wei, and I asked Brandon this too. If you are Vince McMahon, and let's just go with the assumption that he believes he has been wronged in all of this, why do you think arbitration would be the venue you would want to? Like, if you were in this position of being wrongfully accused, there's certain reasons, like you did have a lawyer negotiate this NDA with the exact language of making this an arbitration. But that's like a question I have. I don't have it necessarily an answer to.
My only suspicion is that maybe the full picture and making this even more public than it already is might do that much more damage to Vince McMahon's character, even if he does believe that he's right. It could just be the type of thing where, he feels it's better for all of this to go away and to have it all take place behind closed doors rather than having everything exposed, even if he feels that he's right. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me on the surface, but that's the only explanation I might have. My last question to you is, how much of any of this conversation now being brought back up does the WWE feel? Or do you feel like they've done a good enough job of distancing themselves from everything?
I would tell you, I think the WWE, from a PR strategy, has done an excellent job of separating itself from Vince McMahon. That, yes, all of these, WWE and Vince McMahon are two things that will always be linked. But it's not as though there is, I think, this cloud over WWE to the extent that, that look at like Royal Rumble weekend and that weekend for the company and how under fire they were. And you compare it to now, and it almost like it's one of the reasons, like, I go out of my way to list the fact that there are defendants in this beyond Vince McMahon, because I think to the general public, this is Janel Grant versus Vince McMahon. And I think whether by sheer force or not, WWE has really separated itself from a lot of this, that I don't know if they're necessarily carrying the same baggage being linked to this case, but they are, and they are defendants, and they will need to respond to this case in the coming weeks.